Today we delve into the life of Donald Ruhl, a local hero from Columbus, Montana, whose story is one of courage and the ultimate sacrifice. From the quiet streets of Joliet to the fierce battlegrounds of Iwo Jima, Donald's journey embodies the essence of heroism. We'll explore his transition from a high school student with dreams of baseball to a Marine who gave his all on one of the deadliest beaches of World War II. Join us as we uncover a legacy of a man whose name is etched in the annals of both local and national history. Thank you for being here, and let's honor Private First Class Donald Ruhl together. This is the Big Fat Podcast, and our They Gazed on the Beartooths series, where we dig into the stories that shaped our corner of Montana, in partnership with the Museum of the Beartooths, and made possible by our sponsor, Pinnacle Property of Montana. If at some point you feel we've brought you some value, go ahead and hit that like button, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and then share this episode with your history-loving friends. Penny, welcome to the Big Fat Podcast, our Gazed on the Beartooth series. Take it from here. Let's hear about Donald Ruhl.
Well, I think I'm going to read just a little bit about Donald Ruhl, just to kind of set the stage here, so to speak. Donald Ruhl was born in Columbus, Montana. He went through grammar school in Columbus and graduated high school from Joliet, Montana in 1942. He began work on a farm in Joliet in 1937 while attending school. After graduation, he became a lab assistant for the Independent Refining Company in Laurel, Montana. After 4 or 5 months there, he enlisted in the Marines September 12th, 1942 in Butte, Montana. From there, it's history. So this is a piece that I'm reading from our exhibit. And he ended up being a Congressional Medal of Honor winner. And I'll tell a little bit about the story here. A former farm boy and cattle wrangler, Ruhl landed in the ninth wave and remained hunkered down on the beach for much of the first day. At about 5 that afternoon, his unit was sent to mop up any Japanese emplacements that might have been bypassed in the headlong rush inland. At dusk, they dug in near a large mound of sand that had been ignored by other units who passed through the area. The perimeter was quiet, but after chow, a few Marines went forward to investigate the sandhill. As they approached, the muzzle of a 3-inch field piece popped out of a slit at a base of the mound and began firing at the Marines still on the beach. A second group of Marines attacked the bunker with thermite grenades. When explosions began shaking the interior, a hatch popped open right in front of Ruhl. The young Marine dropped to one knee and emptied the magazine of his M1 carbine into the 8 Japanese soldiers who came charging out. Ammunition exhausted, Ruhl finished off a 9th enemy soldier with his bayonet. His sergeant was impressed. Ruhl had been a discipline problem who stubbornly refused to obey certain orders. He never wore a helmet, preferring the casual look of a baseball cap. Though not a braggart, Ruhl radiated a self-confidence that bothered his comrades. On D-Day +1, Ruhl dragged a wounded Marine to safety under heavy fire. But on D-Day +3, February 21st, his luck ran out. He was among the Marines who led a charge against a trench filled with Japanese soldiers. As he and Sergeant Henry Hansen were climbing a bunker, a Japanese soldier hurled a demolition charge. "Look out," Hank Ruhl cried as he dived on the explosive and hugged it to his chest. The blast threw him backward, blowing a huge cavity in his chest. Donald Jack Ruhl was just 21 years old when he died. His Medal of Honor, was presented to his parents on January 12, 1947. 2 days after Ruhl's fateful demise, a group of Marines raised the American flag on Mount Suribachi.
Jeez.
Wow.
Crazy, huh?
Yeah.
So when he enlisted, he went into the United States Marine Corps Parachute Training School in Camp Gillespie, San Diego, California. which I have in our collections, his original training record, Private First Class. And then another interesting piece. Something else I read about him is he wasn't interested in girls at all in high school or whatever. He was just kind of living on the edge kind of a guy, obviously, from what this says. But one piece that was really interesting to me that I found in the collections, we have so many cool things, but there was a letter from an original letter, 3-page letter written to Donald Ruhl's mom, who then by this time lived in Grable, Wyoming. By the way, Donald is buried in Grable because his parents lived there. But we've had an exhibit at the museum thanks to John Mandeville, who really sought out this information and whatnot and really wanted to put an exhibit in the museum. So it's been there since the early years of the museum being built. But this is a letter that was written by Henry Hansen's mother, to Donald Ruhl's mother.
And that's the actual original
letter.
Okay.
This Henry Hansen was from Massachusetts. We had a Henry Hansen here in Stillwater County, but not the same guy. Just want to clear that up. So this letter was written May 28th, 1945. Dear friends, I received your letter telling about your son Donald giving his life to save my son Henry's life. I just can't express myself in words, the feeling it gives me. But you know the Marines are all like that. They make some very great sacrifices. That's what makes each and every one of them the most wonderful military branch of the U.S., and anyone that has a son in the U.S. Marine Corps should be very proud. I just received a very lovely letter from Henry's platoon leader, Lieutenant John K. Wells. He is in the hospital. He mentioned in his letter that one of Henry's buddies loved him so much that he died trying to save Henry's life. He did not mention the Marine's name or how he died. He also mentioned a corpsman who tried to save him by giving him plasma while being surrounded by Japs. If you can tell me anything more of the incidents, I would be very grateful. I have just wrote Lieutenant Wells of your letter and asked him if he would tell me if Donald was the boy to which he referred to in the letter to me. It is very nice to know that any son, Henry, let me restart that. It is very nice to know that my son Henry was loved and respected so much amongst his buddies, but everybody that ever knew Henry loved him. He was the type of boy that you could love and do for. He was very grateful and always wanted what was right and just. You asked me if I know how many of those Marines came through. No, I don't, but I don't think there was many. How nice it would be if all the boys had come through on that flag raising. How proud they would be. You mentioned in your letter that it was in the newspaper about Donald and Henry. Would you be able to send me a copy of that paper? There has not been anything in our Boston papers about that, and I would like to have it if you could give me one. I'm putting all the different newspaper write-ups and letters I received in a book. I'm having some pictures of Henry done, and I will be very glad to send you one just as soon as I get them. I would love to have one of Donald too, if you will, and I will close for now. And please accept my deepest regrets and sympathy for your loss. Lovingly, your friend, mother of Sergeant Henry O. Hansen. Mrs. Joseph Everly, maybe?
Did Henry die too? She says was.
He died later.
But I mean...
Right, I mean not too long after.
She wrote that letter and he was alive?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. He was deceased by this time.
Okay.
He died, I can't remember, like like a month or so after.
Wow.
Yeah. You know,
It's interesting that they got each other's addresses too.
Yeah.
right. And it's so sad to hear these original stories and see these original documents of things like this, but history is fascinating to me to be able to actually have my hands on something like this.
Yeah, and not only did they seek out their addresses, but they're both suffering. They're both mourning the loss of their child, and they had the wherewithal to write each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard to
Interesting.
find words in those types of situations. I know how uncomfortable it is to go to a funeral and deal with somebody's loss, and you're like, wow, what do you even say to somebody who's lost their child?
But I think when they're that situation, they both understand,
Yeah.
what the other one's going through. It just because she kept saying was. So I was like,
Yeah.
that's what
No,
passed away.
her son did die
Mm-hmm.
not too long after that. So, yeah, and as I mentioned, Donald was given the Congressional Medal of Honor, and I was having trouble researching online how many Montana boys or military people have received the Congressional Medal of Honor, and I believe there's one from the Afghanistan time frame that was given one, but everything that I have read, Donald is the only Marine from Montana that has been given the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Wow.
So we have, in the exhibit, we have a bust, a bronze bust that was made actually by a family member of the Ruhl, of Donald, in the exhibit, and it holds the Congressional Medal of Honor around its neck. And the family gave that to us, and I don't know all the particulars, but from what I understand, the original Medal of Honor medal was stolen
Oh no.
from the family. And so they got another one, and that's the one that we have. But then I think the other one was returned to them, is what I understand.
My gosh.
Yeah, people.
Yeah.
Especially something like that.
Yeah. Why would you steal that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably has somebody who's stealing that has no idea what that is, and probably later,
Realized it.
yeah, when they're showing it to somebody else who's like,
Oh, this is just.
"Oh,
a
do you know what
cool
that is?
medal.
This
Yeah,
is
that's terrible. Though.
Isn't it terrible?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, it's the exhibit when I first started at the museum was a very confusing thing to me, because it had so much about raising the flag on Mount Suribachi that I was thinking, was he the one? It was just not clear. But he was not. But it was his group who did raise the first flag.
What was left?
Yes, what was left of the guys. And I believe this Henry Hansen was one of the first flag raisers. And then they recreated it, the famous photograph that the bronzes and things that you guys have all seen later.
And I think the sad thing about that is that it seems like what I've read on that is that they were hoping that let's get the flag up there, because usually that demoralizes the enemy. Mm-hmm. And they tend to kind of give up, but it didn't. When they raised that flag, the more, it's like the battle got worse. They say it almost inflamed the Japanese, and the battle raged on and on and on. Hmm. And so many of those guys who were there in that photo when they raised the flag eventually didn't make it, because the battle just kept going. And so many of the Japanese were in underground tunnels, and they just kept coming out for a long time. And in fact, I think the last two to surrender there was in 1946 or 1947.
A crazy story, but one that's people of our area should know.
Yeah, he's a hero.
He is a hero.
Do we know how many Montanans were even there?
I don't. I've got quite a bit of files on on Ruhl, and we've even got sand from the beach in the exhibit.
Oh, that's incredible.
I think sand from 2 different beaches over there. Locations where he was. John Mandeville really worked hard to gather.
Did he know him, or?
I don't believe so.
He just knew the story.
He might have.
Maybe he just knew the family or something.
He knew that they were from here, so that. And he might, because Ruhls were here, and I believe Donald's dad was in World War I, maybe. Here's a little thing that was written about Don Ruhl. 2 days previous to the 4th of July, 1923, Don was born in Columbus. Among the 10 places he has attended school are Deer Lodge, Columbus, Absaroka, and Joliet. He came here when he was a sophomore. Don's chief ambition was to become a big league baseball player. When asked about his favorite pastime, Don stated that it was anything worthwhile. He added that he never wastes his time. His favorite food is ice cream. As for favorite subject, Don seems to think that one is about as bad as the other. At the present time, archery is his favorite hobby. Cupid, when asked to describe his ideal girl, Don said, "You can say that other boys may have such a thing, but to me, this is all foolishness." Maybe he loves them all, it says.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Was that like in a yearbook or something?
Yeah. Yeah. Copies of his elementary school photo, 2 of them.
Let's take a short break for this You Should Know moment, brought to you by our sponsor, Pinnacle Property of Montana.
You should know about the U.S. Army sled building secret weapon. Sergeant John Matovich, a local craftsman from Columbus, Montana, was instrumental during World War II for designing and building tactical dog sleds at Camp Rimini outside Helena using German POWs as workmen.
They were going to invade Norway, the army was. That's what this whole thing was started for, was to invade Norway during World War II.
Hence the use of dog sleds.
Hence the use of dog sleds. It's kind of cool.
What year were we going to invade Norway?
42.
Come to the party.
How have I not heard of this?
The invasion was canceled, and all of the over 800 sled dogs and pack dogs were stationed at other remote parts of Baffin Land, Greenland, Antarctica, and Alaska to perform search and rescue missions.
And you can view the craftsmanship of one of Sergeant John Matovich's sleds that was donated and is on display at our Museum of the Beartooths. You should know because sometimes victory rides on the back of a humble dog sled crafted by a Montanan with a knack for wood and winter.
Just a lot of copies of things are what we have. We have a whole box of press and things that John Mandeville did to get this exhibit in the museum and all that kind of stuff. There's one page here that's the Joliet graduating seniors, and you guys all know I'm from between Roberts and Red Lodge, and there's a lot of names on here: Kebschels, Steinmetz, Talmadge. These are all names that are familiar to me from him being there. His dad, and this is from the Annan collection, image number 597. It's his dad, John Ruhl, and Pegleg George Evans working I believe, in a coal mine in the southern part of the county. So the family had been around here a little bit.
How much feedback do you get from like the kids in the community or when they come over to the museum? Is that something that gets some focus?
Yes, as long as I'm right there and
telling about it.
You know, we have his uniform in there as well. And so they don't really grasp what happened. And I've got to do something about that because the story is a little too long.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's many types of museum goers. Some of them will read every word and some of them just skim.
Right.
And so I've got to redo this just to catch your eye, you know. So people will continue to read more.
Right. Yeah, without a visual, almost like a media type thing
audio
going. Yeah.
something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy. But how many of those stories are out there of these guys? There's so many of them. How many of them are untold? How many people died on those beaches under similar circumstances? And their story didn't get told. Nobody saw it happen.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. That's right.
Kind of an incredible waste of life. When you go back and you look at some of these things, and I'd hate to be a parent going back and kind of reviewing what the purpose was. You know, you just have to keep faith that, hey, you were doing your job. You were there for the right reasons. How many times, though, do these selfless sacrifices take place at the behest of decisions or that people way up above make? And so these guys go out and they give their lives.
And they wanted to fight for their country going in.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the ultimate sacrifice for a parent.
Yeah.
Something we don't want to think about.
No. Trying to keep them out of war now. So.
Right. When my daughter went to Kuwait a couple of years ago for nearly 6 months, that was scary.
Yeah.
But there wasn't really much of anything going on over there at the time, but still scary. The other side of the world, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and nowadays, though, how much more communication do you have? You know, like I would imagine she could, you know, call home or get on the internet and you have that kind of contact.
Some of them. I mean, some are still special apps that they can't tell.
Right.
Anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and she couldn't tell me where she was going.
But most of them all can have some contact, you know. Like these guys back then would get on a ship and be gone for a long time. You had to wait months for letters to come home.
They didn't have a cell phone like we have today.
You know, and so you just sit there and hope somebody
and I suppose
doesn't.
once the letters start coming, right, then you can write every day. But if you're on a ship, how often does that go out? You have to be at a port or whatever.
Well, in comparison, when my daughter Cassie she started out in the Army National Guard, and she went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training. Well, somebody in her platoon was under disciplinarian issues, so every one of them got their cell phone taken away. So she was able to let me know when she got there that everything was fine. And she left, you know, a week after or 2 weeks after graduating from high school here in Columbus. And I did not actually hear her voice until the end of July.
And what if you missed that phone call?
Right? Right? But talking about letters, I kept all of her letters that she wrote home during that time frame.
Yeah.
And some days she would write 2 and 3 letters and send them.
I mean, people still do it, and good for them. I mean,
Yeah.
Milo, you
Yeah.
were in it. The military is a big deal, and
It
I don't
is.
think that people understand. You protect our country. It's a big deal.
It is.
So for people to enlist and just do it on their own, I mean, it deserves the respect that they get.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
At my time, there was not a lot going on, and my service was nowhere near what people go through. But I also kind of look back at, a lot of terrible things, let's say, in the last 20 years have happened. A lot of people have lost their lives. But the scale that we would lose men back then was on such a grander scale.
Yes, that's for sure.
And I think it's hard for us to even comprehend that. Like, when 9/11 happened, all of a sudden, wow, like bam, all of a sudden thousands of people died at one time. And everybody was really just blown away by that. And we still are. But these guys, like, there was days like this all the time back then where just 5,000 people just got wiped out today. These types of events, the guy we were talking about yesterday who was on a prison boat heading to Japan, and our own submarines were sinking those boats because they were merchant ships, and thousands of American prisoners would just go down with these ships. They don't even know. Anyway, the scale of sacrifice, I don't think we can even comprehend,
Right.
And then if, you go back from there, it's kind of interesting to me. I think about this, like, as we go on, when you look back at our own Civil War, there was even almost a higher scale. You had guys on both sides, all Americans, and you look at some of these battles where tens of thousands of Americans would die in a day. I mean, just incredible. Anyway, I know that goes deeper and farther off the subject here, but in a lot of ways, I don't feel like we can even comprehend that amount of loss and that amount of sacrifice now. We haven't seen it in our lifetimes.
I think that's why it's hard for the kids when they come to the museum, too, to see like an exhibit like this, because they've never. I mean, even kids now weren't even alive during 9/11.
Right.
So they've just, besides history books, black and white pictures usually, they just cannot. I mean, how do you comprehend something like
Right.
that
When you haven't experienced much.
experienced anything?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not much. It's nothing, which that's a good thing. That's great that they haven't, but we also don't want history to repeat itself.
That's right.
So,
That's why we're here talking about it.
right.
I looked up the Columbus News has an article on him in 1945. I just kind of been able to just skim read it really quick, but do you want to hear what the Columbus News said?
Yes.
September 13th, a Thursday in 1945. It's just a kind of a small article, but it says Donald Ruhl was among Marines in famous picture. That's the little headline. Under the caption, "The Flag Their Son Died For," the current issue of the National Legionnaire, published by the American Legion, carries a story and picture of more than usual interest to local and county residents. The picture displays two Marines in company with Mr. and Mrs. Jack L. Ruhl holding the flag that was raised over Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima when the Marines conquered the Japanese there. Readers will recall that the flag raising showing 6 Marines in action was used as the basis for the 7th War Loan Drive and appeared in practically every paper, magazine, screen, and billboard in the United States. Marine PFC Donald Ruhl, son of the above couple, was one of those 6 men exploited in the flag raising. He was later killed in action on February 22nd last spring while saving the life of his sergeant in a bloody melee. I never know how to say that word. With a bonsai force of Japs. For this valor, he has been liberally decorated posthumously. Donald Ruhl was born here in Columbus and grew to boyhood locally and at Rapelje. Later, he went with his parents to Joliet, from which point he enlisted in the Marines. His father, Jack Ruhl, was a member of the first big contingent of 42 men that was recruited from Stillwater County for entrainment. Interesting word. September 19th, 1917 for Camp Lewis. And we've seen that photo. That means he was probably on that famous photo of those guys at the Columbus train station the day they all left for World War I. And the 91st Division in World War I. Donald is a nephew of Clyde Ruhl of this city and Wes Kearney of Joliet. The picture and story had its source in Denver, where the Ruhls were the guests of Layden Chiles Wickersham, post number 1 of Denver, at a special ceremonial service. They had been called from Grable, Wyoming.
It's interesting that they had them, right? Did maybe the parents think that he was the one that put up the flag?
I don't know. It's interpreted differently by different people, and everything that I have read, he died on such and such day, and then the flag raising wasn't until he died on the 21st, and the flag raising wasn't until the 23rd of February, I believe.
And this one says the 22nd. He killed in action on February 22nd last spring while saving the life of his sergeant.
Yeah.
But still, that's a day earlier than the flag raising, right?
Yeah. On D-Day +1, Ruhl dragged a wounded Marine to safety under heavy fire, but on D-Day +3, February 21st, his luck ran out.
Fake news? I didn't want to say it, but...
It happens.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Everybody's
There's
trying
just dates, and people are trying to sort them out. I get that, too, because it's just a date thing. But interesting that that's how that was stated.
There's a lot of controversy still around that photo, though, and who was in the photo and who wasn't.
Yep.
Well, one thing we know for sure is this guy gave his life on those beaches, though. Whether he was had anything to do with that flag or not, that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. It's an incredible story.
I wonder how many people he saved by doing that.
And if you try to put a chain of events together after that, it's kind of mind-boggling. If he hadn't have done that, you don't know who he saved around you. But how did, in those days after that, I mean, these guys are all in a war. I mean...
Well, and Henry witnessed him doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not like... The thing that I get from it, one of the things, is mentally, how do you see that and continue to just fight and move on? And I mean, how do you even process what just happened?
Right.
Because the next day you're in battle again, or the next minute.
Yeah. I think a lot of it, though, I think some people did shut down. And I think most of them, though, you had to get numb to it really quick because it's going on all around you.
Well, that's just it.
And, but, by him making that sacrifice, how many lives did that affect afterwards, in the days afterwards? Okay, if this guy had been blown up and had died, maybe he hadn't have been there to save this guy who was about to get shot from behind.
Right.
And it's just...
A chain reaction.
It's just mind-boggling to try to think, like, wow, how that could have affected so many things all the way around these guys by one person's sacrifice. And even though he gave his life for Henry ends up...
But I don't know that... I mean, I understand that Henry was right there, but you don't know how many people were close by either that would have got shrapnel or,
Right.
injured severely or even died. He saw it. Henry saw it. So that was obviously... But somebody else saw it.
And even though he took one for the team, so to speak, doesn't mean they all just get to come home.
Right.
Right.
Well, now we're just going to happily go through our day.
Right?
That was kind of heavy.
It was very heavy. Well, thank you, Penny, once again bringing us a great story over from the museum. Now I'm like, the next time I go over there, like I feel bad. How many times have I been over to the museum now, but I haven't studied the plaque there and read all those things either. I'm in a hurry. I'm kind of looking at the things I'm looking at, and it's kind of wild that all of the heavy stories that are all around you there.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yep.
So now I got to go read up, and
I gotta go get myself a book.
you got to get over there and get a
Today.
book.
I gotta do that
There's
today.
only one left. I got the other one.
Okay. Today.
This episode of the Big Fat Podcast in our They Gazed on the Beartooths series was brought to you by Pinnacle Property of Montana. Let Pinnacle Property of Montana help you make your Montana dream come true. Their contact information is below in the description. You can show your support by hitting that like button, subscribing if you haven't already, and sharing this episode with your history-loving friends. We'll see you next time.